Mastering pie crust is a total game changer in the kitchen. It opens the door to so many sweet and savory pies and tarts. And I get it, making it from scratch can feel intimidating. If you don't use the right techniques, you could either end up with a dough that falls apart or is too tough to eat. But it seriously makes a world of difference in both flavor and texture. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through the key techniques that make all the difference. You'll have a dough that's easy to handle, turns out tender, layered, and flaky. And look, you might not perfect it the first time, but you'll still end up with something that tastes great. And you're going to feel good about yourself after. And once you've got this pie crust down, you can use it in pretty much any recipe, but today I'm going to show you how to use it in a simple yet delicious apple tart. So before we get started, let's talk about the butter because the ingredients that you use in your cooking make all the difference in the world. And butter not only adds flavor that you don't get from store-bought crusts, but it also plays a crucial role in texture. And that's because butter is a solid at room temperature, and the pockets of butter is what's going to create layers, making the pie crust flaky. You want to use a European-style butter for this, and there's all kinds out there. Kerrygold is commonly available, and that's the one that I'm using. But the reason this works is because it has a higher fat content, which makes your dough roll out easier and prevents cracking. And the lower water content also helps keep the dough tender. And European butter is cultured, which adds even more flavor. And one last thing, the most important aspect of making any pie crust is to work fast and keep everything cold. If at any point your butter starts to melt, throw all your ingredients back in the refrigerator for a few minutes until they're cold again. It's better to take your time than to rush and mess things up. So let's get started. Start by whisking together a cup and a half of flour, 1 teaspoon salt, and 1 teaspoon sugar in a bowl. Then add a stick and a half of butter cut into about 1/2 inch cubes. Toss the butter, coating it in the flour and smashing the pieces in thin scraps as you go. You want uneven chunks for a flaky texture. Now when it comes to water, this is where it could get tricky. You want to use ice water to keep things cool, but the amount is also really important. If you don't add enough water, your dough will crack and fall apart. And if you add too much, you'll end up with a crust that's too tough. So pour the flour mixture into a work surface and create a well in the center. Add your water and use a bench scraper to mix the dough and break up the butter. The goal is to get the water incorporated into the flour without overworking. This is because it forms gluten and makes the crust tough. Test if the dough holds together. If it's too crumbly, add water a little at a time until it comes together. If it's just a few scraps that are dry, sprinkle them with water and press them into the dough. Okay, next we're going to laminate the dough to create layers. So shape the dough into a rough square and cut it into about 4 quadrants with the bench scraper and stack them on top of each other. Press down, shaping it into a rough circle. And notice how the butter is marbled throughout the dough. That's exactly what you want. Alright, and here you have a perfect pie crust that's ready to use for any and all kinds of recipes. Wrap the dough in plastic wrap. Roll it to release any air bubbles, and refrigerate it for at least 2 hours or overnight. This will allow the gluten to relax and for the dough to continue to hydrate. Okay, so with your pie crust ready, it's time to prepare the tart, and the first step is to roll out your dough. Start by giving the dough a few light whacks with the rolling pin to flatten it out a bit. This will soften the butter and relax the gluten, making it easier to roll out and prevent cracking. When rolling out the dough, start from the center and roll outward to apply even pressure. Make sure you maintain an even thickness throughout. Rotate the dough in quarter turns as you go. This will help it stay round, and flip it occasionally, adding flour to prevent sticking. Once your dough is about 12 inches in diameter, transfer it to a piece of parchment paper. This will make it easier to transfer to the baking sheet later. And continue rolling it until it's about 15 inches. At that point, carefully move it to a sheet pan and put it back in the fridge while you prepare the filling. To begin preparing the filling, in a bowl combine 1/3 cup light brown sugar, 1/2 teaspoon cinnamon, and a 1/2 teaspoon allspice. And you really have a lot of freedom here. If you don't have allspice, you can use all cinnamon or try nutmeg. Anything really is gonna taste great. Next, we're gonna brown the butter for the filling. Place half a stick of butter into a small saute pan over medium heat. Be careful that it's not too hot or your butter will burn instantly. The butter should fully melt before it starts browning. If it starts browning instantly before it melts, then it's too hot. Once it's melted, whisk constantly until it begins to change color. The butter can easily go from brown to burnt, so if that starts happening too fast, don't hesitate to turn down the heat a bit and take your time. See this deep gold brown color? That's what you're looking for. Pull it off the heat just before you think it's ready to prevent it from burning, and place it to the side and allow it to cool while we prepare the apples. So for the apples, you want to go with something like Honeycrisp or Pink Lady apples. Don't buy those red delicious apples, they're not delicious at all. And with the apples standing upright, cut off one side and flip it over to a flat surface. Cut off another side and repeat until you're left with just the core. Now throw that away and cut into about 1/4 inch slices. Alright, it's time to assemble the tart. Bring your crust back out of the fridge. Create about a 2-inch border using the apple slices. Go ahead and fill in the center. And go in with half of your sugar mixture and half of the brown butter. Then repeat with the second layer. Gently fold the pastry over using the parchment paper on all sides. And now we're going to use some egg wash. So this is going to help with browning. Just apply it evenly around all edges. And then this is optional, but I have some Demerara sugar here, and that's going to add nice texture. And finally finish this off with some flaky sea salt. This goes into your preheated oven at 375 degrees for 60 to 75 minutes or until deeply golden brown and bubbly. Alright, so our tart's out of the oven. It's been cooling for a bit and I'm about to give it a try. I don't like tasting food on camera, but here we are. I'm not going to pretend like I'm surprised by this. I've had it like 100 times. I make this all the time. I made it like 3 times this week just to test this recipe for you before I made the video. So, but I'm gonna give it a try and I'm gonna tell you a little bit about it. So here we go. I'm so hungry because I've been making this video for like 7 hours. This is really good. I'm not trying to brag, but it's just like the perfect dessert. Okay, so there's a few things that I really love about this. One, the homemade pie crust. You get a really good butter flavor that you don't get with the store-bought crust. And also the texture is so much flakier. There's just so many more layers and it's just so much more satisfying to eat. And the other thing that makes this really good is the brown butter. So you really don't know how much of a difference it makes until you try it. It's so good. And it goes so well in this with the apples and the cinnamon and the allspice. It just tastes like fall, basically. And it's not too sweet or rich. Honestly, I feel like I could eat one of these in one day, and maybe I have done that before, to be honest. But anyway, moving on. That's everything that I have for you today. And look, I would love if this video reached someone out there, maybe who's new to cooking or looking to improve your skills, and you want to prove to yourself that you can do something you didn't know you could do before, and maybe you'll find out that you really enjoy it. So if you give this a try, I really would love to hear from you. And if you really like this video and you want to help me out and see more videos, then please give me a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you next time.